Morning and welcome everyone to the session, Maximise the Value Potential of Your Data with Data Excellence. Please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best to answer them at the end, but if we run out of time to go through them all, we'll reach out to you afterwards. But with the logistics out the way, I'll hand over to Darren.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Hello and welcome to today's session entitled Maximize the Value Potential of Your Data with Data Excellence. Many thanks for your time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We really appreciate you joining us to join us in this point of view and this discussion. My name is Darren Brunt. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering at Talend for EMEA North, and I want to take you through this session today. So as the role and the value potential of data becomes ever more apparent to organizations, the race to make data a first-class citizen and leveraged asset has never been more front of mind. But in their rush to realize their data potential, many organizations ignore some of the foundational changes required in both technology and culture to enable a maturity path to the discipline of something we at Talend call data excellence, which better enables data value to be realized. In today's session, we're going to look at a number of topics, and we're going to break those down into some key areas here. What is the value potential of data? What are the drivers, opportunities, and challenges of realizing this data nirvana? How do we prepare for success? What are some of the foundational practices that we should put in place from the outset of this journey to provide the best probability of value realization? And what does good look like to those that manage to capitalize on their data assets? Then we're going to look at data excellence in practice. So if realizing data value is the goal, then data excellence is the discipline or practices that better prepare an organization for value realization. Here we're going to run a live demo to help illustrate the data excellence practice in the context of a common data value challenge, that is accurate analytics. And finally, we'll look at how do we embrace and adopt. We'll illustrate the incremental journey we believe an organization should embark on to adopt data excellence principles and show how Talend is set up to be your partner for that journey. At the end, as Jamie mentioned, if you log any questions into the Q&A panel, we'll see what time's left to deal with Q&A, and if not, we'll follow up offline. So let's get into this. So what are the drivers and challenges of organizations realizing the true value potential of their data today? Well, there are many drivers that are driving this focus, one of them being the importance of data in business decisions and business information. So whether it's about enabling business transformation, driving up customer satisfaction, enabling product innovation, or differentiating your service to your clients, data is seen as the bedrock of making and supporting those changes in business. There's significant investment in data assets and associated technologies, and that investment just continues and continues. And so with that in mind, whether we're talking about infrastructure like lakes, warehouses, or lake houses, or the ancillary support such as analytics, IoT, and AI, ML technologies, significant investments are still being made in data assets and surrounding technologies. In addition, there's this insatiable appetite for data. Due to the convergence of business and IT's use of data, the community or the size of the community wishing to consume data has never been bigger. And this insatiable appetite for data and the role of data in people's lives and their work tasks has never been greater. And finally, there's this race to exploit the potential of the unknown, specifically in highly competitive environments. There's this allure of the opportunity of what data might provide an organization, which is simply too great to ignore. So those are the drivers that are making organizations look at the value potential of their data. But what are the biggest inhibitors to organizations realizing this value potential in reality? Sure, there are important problems that need to be solved to enable organizations to become more data-centric, such as collecting data from multiple sources, transforming it, governing it, sharing via various destinations, applications, analyzing the data. These are all relevant tactical challenges, and these need to be done. But none of these are the biggest problem today when it comes to realizing the true value potential of data. We at Talend believe there is something more profound that organizations need to deal with. The biggest problem is that organizations are not getting value from their data because it is not aligned to business need, nor is it fit for purpose. Whilst most organizations are maniacally focused on the mechanics of moving and managing data, few are truly focused on the alignment of their data programs to business strategies that directly support targeted value outcomes. Whilst this alignment is key, there are also foundational practices and disciplines with data that need to be put in place before the full value potential can be realized. We'll be exploring these in the next section. For a long time now, many have said that data is the new oil, which is reflective of the very discussion that we're having today. But how many organizations can truly say that their data is a core value asset within the organization? I like this myth buster from Neil Hampson at PwC, who takes the oil refinery and production analogy a step further, confirming that much data is still undiscovered, unfit for purpose, and costly to process. So how do we go about filling this gap between data maturity and practice today and realizing the opportunity of its full potential? So as you'd expect, there's work to do to realize the value potential of data, but the good news is that it's not rocket science, but a series of practices, disciplines, and measures that could be adopted incrementally to support the data maturity journey required. So how do we realize this value potential of data? Well, we have many raw data assets today, processes and reports, but how do we ensure that they support the value outcomes we need within the business? Going from raw data to its true value potential is a journey. It's a journey of alignment, collaboration, and cultural change, all whilst ensuring incremental value delivery to the business. At Talend, we believe there are three fundamental tenets typically adopted sequentially to help support the journey to value realization, and it all starts with alignment. As an initial step, organizations need to focus on where the organization can create more value than today and understand the data assets that help make that happen. Only at this point can organizations align business strategy with investments in data initiatives and hence prioritize their spend, focusing on where the best return of investment exists. With such focus, the value potential of data may be recognized incrementally through a series of discrete initiatives, with the key that value is being created and recognized at more frequent intervals throughout the journey. Secondly is quality. To continue the oil analogy, how do we measure the standard of the raw product and understand the size and the type of the refinement process ahead to create the deliverable required? Ensuring quality in data is fundamental to realizing the full value potential of data, but how do we measure quality, fix issues quickly, and operationalize the result to ensure value is delivered as soon as possible? And finally, trust. Unlike quality, trust is a more subjective measure about the confidence we have that the data is appropriate for the task at hand and fit for purpose. Quality is an element of trust, but there are other factors at play here, which I'll explain a little later on. So, as you can see, there are several steps in this journey to help organizations realize the value potential of their data, which is a combination of practices, disciplines, and measures to deliver on the goal. We at Talend call this journey data excellence. So how are data management priorities and the alignment to the business value outcomes shaping up in 2023? A recent IDC survey shows that data security, increasing trust in data, governance, and staff productivity top the list of priorities, which is probably no real surprise. What was a surprise, however, is the relatively low priority of articulating business value of data, which was ranked 9th place priority out of the options presented in the survey. While CXO metrics such as identifying critical data elements, storing assets within a catalog, understanding the extent of lineage, and profiling quality scores for data sets are all good metrics that indicate the effectiveness of the data management organization. But tying data metrics to business outcome metrics and showing positive correlations between the two should be the goal of every chief data officer or analytics officer in our view. Otherwise, the opportunity to truly capitalize on the value potential of data is likely to be missed. So it's important to understand how we define and recognize quality and trust within our general lives today before we explore the relationship to data. Let's take a look at some definitions first to help understand the differences and the subtleties of each term. Quality is defined as the standard of something as measured against other things of a similar kind. So the relativeness of something compared to something else, or the degree of excellence associated with something. So it's a very quantitative measure. It's something that is very objective in its measurement. And we use terms like accuracy, compliance, durability, reliability, safety, security, typically to define aspects of quality that we expect in products and services we consume today. Trust, on the other hand, is more of an emotional or a subjective feeling. It's a belief in the reliability, truth, or the ability of something or something to fulfill a task. So trust is a very subjective measure, where quality is a very objective measure. And we use words like authenticity, competence, faith, or dependability to think about things that we trust, as opposed to quality as a definition. But there is no doubt that these two aspects are related, and with quality, we can drive trust in the goods and services that we procure and use today. So quality and trust are all around us in the products and services we use today. We've developed ways to measure and verify quality and confidence in these assets through belief in third-party systems and processes. For example, the British Standards Institute was founded in 1901 to help standardize engineering practices from a quality assurance and certification perspective, and is still very much the forefront of the UK's national standards body today. The BSI built practices and certifications which are still recognized as a symbol of quality and confidence today in the form of the kite mark symbol, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Built on top of that quality aspect is the notion of verification, driven both by certification testing and social voting or peer voting that we recognize today in the form of vendors such as Trustpilot. So given our expectations of quality and trust in the goods and services we generally consume today, why don't we have the same expectations of data? So if we explore this a little bit further, whilst there are no generally accepted concepts of a standard data kite mark today, we can hypothesize what the constituent elements of measurement and certification processes for such a data kite mark might be, such as observability. We want some instant insights into a data kite mark. We want readability and ease of use. We want something that's easy to engage with if it's a representation of the quality and certification of data as a kite mark. We want measurability. We want quantifiable measures in this kite mark. We want things that we understand that we're measuring. We want an operational dimension, how people use data as opposed to what it's described and how it's compliant. But we also probably want flexibility in what we measure as a constituent element of any such kite mark or certification. A kite mark in data also needs to be timely. So data has a life cycle from the point it's created to ingested to manipulated and consumed and ultimately retired. That data life cycle has a time phase associated with it. So whatever measurement or kite mark we might want to put on data, it definitely has to have some sort of time dimension so we understand where we are in that journey. And finally, a kite mark, because of the time dimension, needs an element of historization. It should be providing context about where that kite mark is or the value of that kite mark is in the overall journey of the data to provide context. That will help us understand any trends in the kite mark and therefore any concerns that we have in the direction of travel with regard to that evaluation itself. So there is no such data kite mark that really exists as a standard today, but you'll be pleased to understand when we get to the demo in a second that within Talend, we've instrumented our platform with something we call the data trust score. And it is that trust score that provides us with that data kite mark. So what does good look like to companies that have been successful on their data excellence journey? I'd like to share a story that I think will resonate with you. Our customer, Vyaire, was prepared for the unthinkable thanks to their data excellence journey. Vyaire is one of the largest companies in the global healthcare ecosystem. It offers products for the diagnosis, treatment, and monitoring of respiratory conditions. So what was their challenge? Well, when the pandemic hit, the company faced an unprecedented demand. They were currently producing 6 ventilators a day until they suddenly received an order from the US government for 20,000 ventilators. They realized they faced an evolve or die situation with regard to their company and jumped into action to figure out how they could meet this demand. Their solution was to create a unified data platform on a cloud-based enterprise architecture to drive accurate, healthy insights in every instrumentation across their business, from the factory floor all the way up to the C-suite. And once they'd established this confidence in their data and the processes that the data was using, they were able then to partner with an aerospace manufacturer to offload and increase production in multiple sites, but use common process and data. And it's because of that confidence in the data, they were able to move their production to multiple sites with third parties. The results, well, there are a number of positive outcomes of the story. One of the most amazing is the ventilator output increased by 100-fold per day, all due to ensuring that Via were able to realize the value potential of their data in production to manage production in multiple sites concurrently. So let's move on and take a look at data excellence in practice in the form of a live demo addressing a common data value challenge, accuracy in analytics. I'm sure that's something that we all understand. So from a demo scenario, we're going to be looking at a fictitious company called Acme Fashion. Acme Fashion is a luxury goods retailer targeting some key consumer demographics. They typically look to target high-income young Londoners living in upcoming or funky areas of the city. However, as a luxury goods retailer, with the economic headwinds in play, their sales are in decline. So they're looking to target and upsell specific cohorts based on their existing customer data, based on where they know they're typically susceptible to upsell process. The challenge is that all of the customer segmentation reports that they're using in marketing and marketing analytics reports a number of data issues with their geographic segmentation and the customer ratings that are being used, preventing them from concluding their upsell process. Within Acme Fashion, they also have this concept of a lifetime value of a customer. So their propensity to buy, their potential to buy. And again, these LTVs or lifetime values designations are tiered in bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, indicating the propensity of customers' willingness or ability to buy additional goods or services from the organization. And typically, clearly, we're looking at high LTV, young Londoners in upcoming areas. So that's the kind of target cohort that we're trying to address within the organization. So let's just take a look at the demo storyboard for the scenario which we're just about to embark upon. At the front end, we have a data analyst that's trying to use a sales analytics report to look at those cohorts for upsell and cross-sell. And our journey starts really with the data analyst and the data owner collaborating around discovery, around what the report is, where the report lives, and the association of that report to technical infrastructure and data ownership within the organization. The data owner, once identified, then takes responsibility for the curation and improvement of their data to help with completing and fixing that report. The data owner is enabled with self-service data wrangling capabilities that immediately identify issues with the data and guide the data owner to resolve and curate the data to create a more quality output of the data for consumption. A data engineer typically then is involved in operationalizing those changes. It's really important in an organization that we maintain governance over data and data changes within an organization. So here we're going to see the role of a data engineer who helps the business and the analysts operationalize their changes to ensure that we understand the lineage of that change and the governance of that change within the organization. But with every will in the world, we probably still may have outliers or issues in the data which are corner cases, which again still perhaps need to be addressed to help optimize the final set of data that we're willing to share or certify for inclusion in the report. And here we're going to engage the data stewards or compliance officers that will help us remediate any further delinquent data that's identified within that data set. And finally, we complete the journey, coming back to the data analyst and the data owner to, re-eyeball their data, to look at the improvements in the data that's actually been enabled, and ultimately certify and share that data so that it's fit for purpose and available, to support the marketing requirements. So within this demonstration, I'm going to be wearing multiple hats. I'm going to be a data analyst. I'm going to be a data owner. I'm going to be a data engineer and a compliance officer or a data steward. So I'm going to try and signpost to you as we go through the demonstration when I'm changing these personas. The point here is that there's clearly collaboration between various personas in a common data journey to help accelerate and bring skills to the process where they're appropriate and leverage those skills in a seamless way. What we're going to show here, however, is how once we've identified an issue with data value within the organization, how we can rapidly go through a series of steps to drive incremental improvement in that data and ultimately, increase the value of data for its intended purpose, which is clearly the ability to drive the segmentation reporting and the analytics for cohort upsell. So if there's one picture that you kind of maybe should try and keep in your mind, it's this journey. I'll try and reflect back and forth as we go through the demonstration. But let's kick off, as the data analyst who is looking at our particular report. So here I am as the data analyst. I'm going to go into Power BI and take a look at the customer segmentation report that I've been asked to look at for driving our marketing upsell campaign. And as the report builds, this report, as you can see, is called Age by Borough Report. It's looking at the average age in various London boroughs and looking at the number of customers that we have in each one of those boroughs. So the first thing that the analyst notices is that there seems to be quite a lot of London boroughs, on the horizontal axis here. And immediately what we can see is that, there's a lot of duplication, there's misspellings, there's incompletions in these London boroughs, indicating that the borough information is not using our reference data and therefore, skewing the way in which we can segment these cohorts to look at where our target upsell should be. We can see things with, spelling mistakes, we can see abbreviations, we can see all sorts of challenges, in those London borough designations. So as a data analyst, what can I do about this? I'm consuming a report that is not fit for purpose. So what I want to do is try and understand, well, what does this report mean to the business? Am I in the right place to support the objective which I'm trying to achieve? And if I am, what is the technical infrastructure or the data that supports this report so I can actually understand how I might go about driving change or improvement in the underlying technical infrastructure? So as the analyst, I'm going to log into Talend's data catalog. And the catalog presents me with a default dashboard here of all of the metrics that I particularly have an interest in, like who's maintaining which data sets, what values are under management, what business terms are in the glossary, etc. But what I want to do is look for information associated with that particular report, age by borough report. Now, I can drill through and look at the hierarchy within the actual catalog, or I can use the faceted search here over on the right-hand side to start looking in a faceted way across the entire catalog. So if I just start looking for something like age, I can see that there are lots of attributes and dimensions and things associated with age. So let's continue with our search, age by borough. And suddenly I can start to see the list honed down. I can see something here called age by borough in the business glossary. I can see some business rules associated with things that look like borough and policies associated with boroughs. But what I want to do here is really start with the business definition. In the glossary that's in the catalog, what do we mean by this age by borough report? So in the business glossary or the business definition, we can see that this is a sales report to generate cohorts of customer average by borough. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. It's used in the planning and upsell and cross-sell campaigns of premium line goods. Okay, an example is shown below. Okay, so my report and this report don't quite look the same, but it seems like I'm in the right place. The catalog is also indicating that this is associated with marketing and sales. So I am in the right place here. But how do I understand how this report from a business designation relates to our technical infrastructure and data sets? Within the Talend data catalog, we're able to also analyze what we call semantic flow. And semantic flow is the relationship between the business world and the technical world and the assets that support business policies, definitions, dimensions, or what other aspects we want to look at. So here within the business glossary, we were looking at this age by borough report. What I can see here is it's semantically linked to another business concept called customers, which is good because we should be looking at customers within this report, but it's also semantically linked to this other article within the catalog, within a folder called the Power BI Customer Analytics folder. And there is this corresponding report called Age by Borough report, which actually is looking like the Power BI report that I was previously looking at directly within Power BI. So as the analyst, I'm comfortable and confident that I'm looking at the right report and it's associated with the right business intent around what I'm trying to achieve. So what I'm going to do is drill further into that Power BI report and the metadata associated with it. And now, rather than looking at the semantic flow, I can start looking at the data flow associated with this report. So here I am in the actual information associated with that report. Here you can see the dimensions that we're looking at, and borough was one of the dimensions that clearly we had an issue with. And what I'm going to ask the catalog to do is highlight the path where this borough information is actually sourced as part of the report that we see in Power BI. And in this particular example, we can see this is particularly simple lineage. But what we can see here is that this customer LDN borough artifact comes from a table in a Snowflake data warehouse, okay? And within the catalog, I have all the metadata that enables me to identify what these assets are. So this is a Snowflake data warehouse. It's maintained by IT operations. It looks like it's hosted in EU Central Snowflake, okay? So we're looking at data that is hosted in the EU. We have within there a schema called Sandpit, and I can see that this is a database for transient use. I can now start to see details about who owns various assets within this part of the organization. So here I can see this particular gentleman, Darren Brunt, who owns this particular database. And within that database, I can also see this customer LDN table where our borough information is actually sourced. This has been designated that it contains marketing and sales information and is indeed maintained by the same individual. So this is giving me a sense of the technical lineage. This is where my Power BI sources its borough data. But the borough data appears to be at least one of the inaccuracies in our data. So what we can also do here is say, well, what other effects might be occurring on our definition of borough? And what we can do here is, if I just open this up one more time and then highlight the path, I can now start to see not just the technical lineage of where my report consumes the borough information from, but also the semantic relationships that borough has to business terminology and business concepts. So here we can see, if we look at the semantic side of the house, I can see that borough is associated with business glossary terms called London boroughs. So absolutely, this should be London boroughs only that's in this report. I can also see that borough is associated with something called a customer borough rule, which is part of a customer maintenance policy that's enacting on this data. So within the catalog, I'm not only seeing just the technical metadata, but also the business relationships to this data and the intentions around what this data should be represented, or the rules that this data is under. So I just take a quick look here, for example, at London boroughs. We can see here that the reference data definition of what these boroughs should be is a limited set and a reference set of data that looks smaller than what we had. Now, if I look at, for example, the customer borough rule, what I can see here is that saying, every customer address should have a valid borough, suburb, or similar geographic entity. So, we understand they should be London boroughs. So what I'm going to do now is drill further into the catalog to take a look at the data itself. And here we start the deeper inspection of what this data actually is and what we intend the data to mean. So here I can see at the overview page of this table an overview of the actual metadata of the schema itself. Here I can see the different attributes. I can also see here some high-level data quality profiling statistics. So customer number, they all look unique and distinct. They're well dispersed from a distribution point of view. Age also well distributed here. When I look at things like ratings, however, there are lots of empty values. And when I look at boroughs, whilst there aren't empty values, there's lots of duplicates, which you would expect. Within the catalog, though, we also have the ability to semantically determine what we believe the data to be and apply that data classification regime to the data when we're sampling the data when we're doing our actual profiling. What we can see here is that for a borough, for the borough attribute, we're only 42% sure that these are classified London boroughs, which is a very low score for something that should be definitively London boroughs, indicating that we do have an issue with the quality of alignment of borough and what its intention is, from a business term. So if I just drill into borough a second, I can see that, at the top end of the frequency, we do have what look like valid London boroughs, but there's a big distribution of how this information is actually being stored. And again, because it's scoring so low at 42%, we believe that it's still possibly a string as opposed to anything else semantically. I can also, within the catalog, take a look at the data itself if I have the privileges to do so. Oops, sorry, data sample. And here I can start to see exactly what the problem might be. So here I can see things like Caxton, which clearly is not a London borough, Oterwalk, which looks like something has been trimmed off that, spelling mistakes, all sorts of challenges, in the data that would lead me to believe that, this is exactly where the source of my problem is. Now, because of the metadata associated with our table, we understand also that it is this person called Darren Brunt who looks after this data. So as the data analyst, I'm now going to ask the data owner to take a look at their data and see what they can do to improve that concept of borough, because it doesn't look like it's well aligned with its semantic intentions. So let's leave the data analyst role for a second and actually now become the data owner to take a look at, how I might go about remediating and fixing issues with our customer London data. So here I am as the data owner. I'm logging into Talend here. And the first thing I want to do is actually, get a connection, to my data so I can actually start to get those initial insights around what might be wrong with my data within that source. So I head towards something that we call in Talend data inventory. And data inventory is where we store, all of our connections to sources and targets that are under management within the Talend platform. As part of data inventory, we also have this concept of what we call the Talend trust score. Remember, we were talking earlier on about a data kite mark, something that can give us some factual information about data, score data across a number of different dimensions, and give us some initial insights into the suitability of data and the trustworthiness of that data and whether it's fit for purpose. So within the data inventory, every single data asset that's under management automatically gets a trust score computed for it. And whether we look at an aggregate level here across all the different dimensions of the trust score or at an individual data set level, a trust score is individually calculated for each and every one of the data assets under management. Okay, so the trust score within Talend is a value out of a total of 5. So obviously, the nearer to 5, the more trustworthy the data should be from an evaluation point of view. And this data console that you see here is a single pane of glass where we can look at across all of our data sets or a subset of our data sets, start and drive analysis into particular anomalies or challenges in our data sets, and gives us this single point of entry into all the data under management and in Talend and all of the insights associated with that. So the aggregate trust score that I can see here has a combination of validity. How valid is the data according to its schema or definition? How popular is the data in terms of social curation and social voting of data or approvals of data within the platform? How complete is data in terms of its completion of valid values in the schema as it's defined? How discoverable is the data? Within the catalog, within the inventory, we can add metadata tagging to help people discover in additional ways data of interest. And so discoverability is a way also that helps us with the trustworthiness of data. And finally, the operational dimension that we were mentioning before. How is the data actually used? How much is it used across the Talend platform? Again, well-used data suggests that it is something that is trustworthy because it's used and trusted by multiple people for multiple reasons. Each one of these dimensions has a different sort of threshold and scoring that gives us this concept of the graphing that you see across the right-hand side here, which is giving us a sense of the historization of each one of these dimensions or across all of those dimensions over time. So We'll look more at these aspects as we go through the demonstration, but for the moment, as the data owner, I now want to establish a connection to my data in that Snowflake data warehouse. So many connections under management here. I'm going to search for a connection that is associated with our data warehouse. Here we can see a connection to our Snowflake data warehouse. And what I'm going to do here is add what we call a crawler. I don't know where that customer LDN data exists within my Snowflake data warehouse. So what I'm going to do is add a crawler, which is a push down execution into the Snowflake data warehouse, which is going to gather metadata across all of my information that's stored in that Snowflake data warehouse. I'm going to refine the search, just looking for things with the letters LDN within them, and immediately I can see within that Snowflake data warehouse something called customers LDN. That was the table the data analyst asked me to take a look at to try and understand what might be an issue with this. Now, what I'm doing here within the inventory is creating a new data set. Now, for the moment, I don't know what this data set is or how compliant it might be, so I don't particularly want to expose it or share it with anyone else in our Talend community. So for the moment, I'm just going to make that a personal or private data set and ask the crawler, which will now go down into the Snowflake data warehouse, run compute locally to look for that customer's LDN table, bring all of the metadata about that table back into Talend, but also at the same time, make a first assessment of that trust score. And it's that trust score that's going to give me the immediacy of insight as to perhaps where the issues might be in my data. And also, when we do the semantic determination of what the data represents, give me an idea of compliance of the data associated with the business intentions that we have. So that data set has just been created by the looks of it. So now let me go into data sets and just look for the data sets that have been recently created. Here's one called Customers London 1 minute ago. So let's just take a look directly into here. So as the data owner, I've done nothing at the moment other than just pushed a few buttons. Okay, so what we immediately start to see is an initial trust score. So our initial trust score for this new data set that we've just brought into the Talend data inventory is scoring 2.55 out of 5, which in itself probably isn't a particularly bad score. But look where the scoring is showing us we have issues. We have issues with validity. Only 80% of the data is valid according to how we semantically determine what the data should represent. From a popularity point of view, the data is not particularly popular because it's just been introduced. From a completeness point of view, however, the data looks relatively complete. So it might be the data is not valid within it, but it is complete in terms of having values in various attributes. It's low from a discoverability point of view right now, and from a usage point of view, 0%. Nobody's using this data yet, within the Talend environment. From a data quality perspective, the initial trust score is also showing us that we have about 7.8% invalid data in this data set. I don't know where that invalid data is yet, but again, from a high level data quality profiling, it's showing me where our potential challenges might be. In addition, as we're looking at and semantically profiling or classifying this data against intended usage, we can also start to see, from this signposting here, where issues might be in this data. So again, we can see there is an attribute called borough in this data. We believe that they should be London boroughs, from the semantic determination of what that data looks like. But if that is the case, then 58% of this data is invalid for London boroughs. Again, immediately giving me a pictorial view of exactly where issues might be in my data by these red or non-compliant indicators, indicating, for example, in date of birth, I've got some issues. In borough, I've got a lot of issues. And the rest of the data at the moment looks relatively good. So let's just take our first eyeball of this data as the data owner. So what we're looking at here is a sample of the data that has been extracted from the Snowflake data warehouse. And immediately I can see the schema that runs along the top here, but also the inferred data classification or semantic classification of the various data that we've looked at. And here we can see if borough is indeed London boroughs, as it was designated as part of our semantic determination, then all of the red lines here indicate non-compliance. There are a lot of non-compliant London boroughs here. Similarly, with date of birth, I've got some, looks like various formats of dates and therefore, non-compliant dates. But my attention is drawn to our customer rating. on the right-hand side here, because at the moment the customer rating is determined semantically as a string. Well, we know that actually, we want to interpret this as one of our customer ratings, not just as a general string, because it looks like we also have some issues from a quality perspective in the designation and the completeness of our customer ratings. So what I might want to do here is also change the inferred data classification of this particular attribute. So we can see here from the semantic profiling, this could be a US city list, it could be a last name, or it could be a customer rating at 25%. What I'm going to say to the system is I want this to be considered a customer rating. And by doing so, I'm going to ask the system to recompute that trust score. Because now I've refactored what I want the system to interpret that particular attribute as, and therefore reassess the compliance against our semantic definitions. Okay, so what's happening now is the system is going back to the Snowflake data warehouse, reprofiling and reanalyzing that data, but now with a different target threshold, for that rating attribute. And what should happen is we get a new trust score revealed here and a new compliance revealed here, which gives us a more true sense of the compliance of our data set. Again, now that I've told the system that that particular attribute should be viewed as a customer rating, then it will always be considered a customer rating from a data classification and a conformance perspective as we move forwards. So let's just wait for that to update the cache, and then we should get our updated trust score. So if you remember before, we were 2.55 out of 5. Actually, changing that has pushed us down. We're now got a more true trust score in our data of 2.41 out of 5, because guess what? If this is a customer rating rather than just a general text field, then suddenly I'm highlighting a whole series of challenges with the designations of some of these customer ratings as well. Lots of spelling mistakes, lots of empty cells, et cetera, et cetera. So now as the data owner, I'm getting a visual cue. You can see it in front of us, exactly where the challenges are with the data that this report is deriving. So what I'm going to do is actually build what we call a preparation. I'm going to take some accountability and ownership for trying to fix this data to help drive improvement in that report. So what I'm going to do here is add what we call a preparation in Talend to this data. So data preparation is a data blending, a data wrangling tool that is non-technical. So as a data owner, I get a similar interface to what we saw earlier, but now I also get some insights into what my data is. I can see, the distribution of data. I can see values. I can see patterns of how the data is formed. But also you can see here, there's a whole bunch of functions that I can apply, to this data to help drive improvement, change, enrichment, or whatever it might be, to the data to change or ratify the data to be more fit for purpose. Okay, so what I can see here is basically, I have my London boroughs, and a lot of them are clearly not designated London boroughs. And the system is making some suggestions about what might you want to do, with this data. Well, one of the suggestions is clear the cells of invalid values. Well, if I were to do that, and you can see hovering over it loads what we call a preview. If I were to do that, I'd basically get rid of a lot of data, which means that recoverability of what these London boroughs are would probably then be impossible. I could, delete the rows with an invalid cell. Again, if I were to do that, you can see the system showing me from a view perspective, well, you get rid of quite a lot of the data if that were the case. Actually, what I want to do here is perhaps look at something called fuzzy matching. We know the base semantic type is a London borough, so perhaps there's something I can do with fuzzy matching against the default London borough semantic type to see if I can fix a lot of these problems. And so with the matching threshold of 80%, let's hover over the submit button and see what that would do. What we can see here is the green is showing us that if I were to apply this particular function, we'd get some positive change in what looks like maybe 50% of our delinquent data, but it would still leave a lot of anomalies here. So again, I might want to change the threshold, or actually in this case, I'm going to ask the system, say, just give me the closest match that you have to the semantic definitions in the London Borough definition. And what we can see here is I get a much better result if I just look for the closest match to the default types. So I'm going to take that function and apply it. Now, within Talend data preparation, we're not actually modifying the data here. We're not modifying the data under management in Snowflake. We're actually just creating a view of that data for the user to verify and operationalize. I'm just going to move ahead here and just move ahead with some of these other challenges. I'm going to look at fixing these dates. So for example, here, I want to change the date format. What's the current format? Well, the patterns are showing me there's multiple formats here. I don't know. So I'm just going to say, stay with this ISO 8601 date and see what that does for me. So I've fixed many of my dates. Similarly with the customer rating, I'm going to apply our same fuzzy matching routine here to see if I can get a better outcome for our fuzzy matching on our rating. So again, here you can see by the red bars that from 58% non-compliance of London boroughs, I'm now down to 6%. From I think 30-odd% of non-compliance of ratings, I'm now down to 2%. So as a data owner, I haven't fixed all of my data, but in just 3 clicks, I've improved the data considerably from what its original form was. And that preparation is the unit of operationalization. I've not modified this data in Snowflake. What I have done is create a series of intentions that I want to be operationalized to go and repair that data in Snowflake. So what I'm going to do here is actually move that preparation into a IT sanction folder to notify IT that I actually want this data preparation now operationalized and applied to my data. So let's just leave the role of the data owner for a moment and now move to the role of the data engineer. From an operationalization point of view, I might use a tool like Studio to operationalize that change. And I'm just going to run that directly from here. So bear with me while I find the particular job that I want to run here. So here we have something called improved data tasks. So as a data engineer, I may have, taken the preparation that the business owner has communicated to me they want operationalized. I'm going to take our customers' London data. I'm going to run that preparation that's been designated by the business or by the data owner on top of here, and I'm going to update what I can directly back into the customer's London table. At the same time, I'm also going to apply some data quality rules here to try and look for those delinquent customer ratings that might still need issues resolving, or any customer ratings or any other non-compliance in our data that might still need to be dealt with by stewards. So if I, as a data engineer, just run this process now, what this is going to do is apply our preparation we just built to our original data and hopefully drive some of the improvements in that data. Whilst that's running, what I also want to show you is data quality rules. So within Talend, we have the ability to set up data quality rules or business rules that help us identify how we want to articulate particular rules to apply to our data. If you remember the customer lifetime rating concept within our data, we had different tiers, and those tiers were between 10,000, 100,000, million, I believe, and beyond. So here we can see, for example, something called a gold customer rating. And this is a business rule that's been defined in Talend and now applied to our data to determine whether we have the right customer rating rules in place. So here we can see lifetime value must be between 100,000 and 1 million, for someone to be gold. So within the business rule, we very easily define the threshold of the rule. So it's between 10,000 and 1 million. And if that's the case, if the LTV is in that range, then the customer rating must be gold. Okay, and we can build more complex versions of these. We can add all sorts of different operators to the validations that we're applying and build out our data quality rules. Once those rules are in the system, we can apply them to data operationally or from a visual perspective. Now, that particular activity has been working in the background, hopefully. Now what I'm going to do is actually take on the hat as a data steward. So somebody who has responsibility for remediating and improving data that has come from an operational perspective. And within here, I want to look for customer segmentation. That's my particular campaign that we're working on. Let's just see what data stewardship tasks have been created as a result of that workload that we just ran. What I'm going to do is just take the top 10 tasks of this queue and give them back to me. And immediately, I might make this a little bigger for you. Immediately, I can start to see from a data stewardship point of view, a very similar interface to what we saw before. The difference here is that I now have the ability to make decisions around the survivorship or the changes that are applied to this data on a record by record basis. So here we can see a particular record. It looks generally complete, but this little padlock is indicating that the task that I've been asked to validate contains some invalid values, and it's this customer rating that's the invalid value here. And if I look at my customer rating and the business rules that we're applying to them, we can see that, at the minute we have very little compliance against our platinum customers, which, would be this more than 1 million, and gold customers. So none of our customer ratings are actually resonating with the rules. And so this particular silver here, we recognize that, platinum is above 1 million. So if I were to change this to platinum's a value for the particular customer rating, suddenly my lock opens, and I'm now able to mark this task as complete because my red bar has disappeared. And so as a data steward, I go through looking at the tasks that have been allocated to me, looking at what I need to do to make decisions here, and enacting that change. And those changes can then be synchronized with the processing into our Snowflake data warehouse. So here we have an example of one London borough that didn't get fuzzy matched. It was obviously too far from the actual definition to get fuzzy matched. It looks like it might be Waltham Forest, but let's just, from a semantic point of view, using the type down against the type, while the only option here is Waltham Forest, I'm going to fix that to Waltham Forest. And similarly, in this case, we have a customer rating which is empty, not invalid, but empty. And I think if I were to say, for example, this is silver, the red bar indicating, no, that's non-compliant with the rating rules that you have in place. Actually, what this should be is gold. So the data steward works through this process, going to fix and remediate those delinquent records that still exist, to provide subject matter expertise to go and repair and improve this data. And everything that I'm doing here is recorded, okay? Everything that I'm enacting is being recorded so that we understand the relationship that this steward has with the changes in data. I changed Waltham Forest to Waltham Forest. I moved an empty rating to silver, and then moved silver to gold. So every single step is being recorded in case we need that for audit or reverse purposes. So if I validate those open or those completed tasks, those 2 tasks that I had on my queue are now disappeared. Okay, they have gone away for processing and repatriation with the processing against the Snowflake data warehouse, and I now have the ability to continue my journey with those remaining tasks. Just to finish up on the demo, what I do want to do though is go back into my data inventory. I want to go back into our customer London data set and actually look at the improvements that I've managed to generate as a result of those changes. So here we go back into the customer London data set. I think we're at 2.41 when we left it before those changes were applied. I'm just going to actually refresh the trust score. That happens automatically, but here I'm going to force a refresh to see what the latest version of that trust score is, based on the general remediation we did as the data owner through data preparation, but also those couple of tasks that we just launched from the data stewardship to go and fix those specific records. And as that process completes, again, we're pushing down the compute into the Snowflake data warehouse, we're recomputing the sample, we're bringing back the semantic determinations of the data, and obviously scoring that data, and hopefully giving us an updated trust score any moment now. What I do see within the data, though, hopefully we'll see here, is a big change in the compliance of things like London boroughs, and in terms of date of births, that should hopefully come back from this updated cache. Here we go. So we can now see that our trust score has leapt from 2.41 to 2.98. We still have some work to do. Obviously, the stewards are still working through those various tasks that have been emerged for them. We still have 1.7% of invalid values in the data, and we still have some empty data. Obviously, there's still lifetime value associations that haven't been completed, but that is a much better picture than when we first started this exercise, 10 minutes ago, or whatever it might be. So an empirical change in the trust score, we can see where those changes have been improved. There's still some anomalies in the data, but as the hopefully as the stewards work through those tasks, they will also get completed. Just to finish up here, if I now go back as the data analyst into my business report, I can now simply hit refresh on that report and see what the changes have been that might change the way in which I can visualize my sales data. So as we go back and recompute that report, suddenly we can start to see that I do now have reference boroughs along the bottom here. I do now have good segmentation and good analysis of where our customer cohorts sit. So if I'm looking for a low average age in up and coming areas of London where we have the most customers, for example, it might be Newham as an area where the average age is 27.5 and we have 5 customers in that area. I know another area might be Croydon, where the average age is 44 and we have 6 customers in that area. So from a data analyst point of view, my data now looks my report now looks complete because the data is now fit for purpose and realizing its true value potential. I might notify the data owner, who then can I don't know, certify this data within the inventory, and perhaps even I might give a social vote on this data. Oops, I can scroll down here to say I'm happy with this data. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with what this data now represents compared to what it was. And so everything we do is driving up that trust score as we start voting on our social curation and voting on that data. So I realize that we're a little over time, so I'm going to speed through the rest of this a second. So what did we see in the demonstration? Hopefully we saw ease of discovery, how we unite business and technical domains to simplify our data discovery. We saw that the platform provided these instant insights. We had automated data quality and compliance assessments through the trust score and through the data classifications that we saw to determine whether data was fit for purpose. We also had guided remediation. There are visual cues across all of the tooling to help people engage with their data, to help understand where the anomalies lie and where potential for improvement exists. The persona experiences are all integrated between the data analyst and the data owner and the data stewards. We saw people working together in a common platform, sharing interfaces and sharing visualizations. And finally, we saw demonstrable benefit demonstrated fast. I think, within 3 clicks of a data owner on that data set and a couple of data stewardship tasks driving improvement, we saw demonstrable improvement in the trust score associated with that data set. So finishing up here, how do we adopt our pathway to data excellence? Again, I'm going to go a little bit quickly through here, but the idea is that we provide an infrastructure, a series of processes and best practices to help an organization achieve this pathway to data excellence. It starts by building confidence in your data. We then enable or establish controls on our data to put in place the appropriate levels of governance and privacy, etc., and then ultimately finish off with mitigating the risks and governance as we start propagating data for consumption to supporting one of these particular outcomes that might happen on the right-hand side. But to start with, it really is all about building confidence in your data. And some of the techniques that you've seen today around scoring data, trust score, looking at the visual cues will help us discover what our data is, help us put in place policies for protection and validation of the data, and ultimately provide the option of classifying and curating that data if it's not appropriate or fit for purpose. The next stage in your journey might be to involve people and processes in this journey. So the idea of introducing data stewards to guide remediation and improvement or make decisions on the data where anomalies, operational anomalies exist. And finally, depending on the size of the estate and the complexity, you might wish to start the process of cataloging your assets and looking at the lineage and the provenance of data and making sure that users can engage with that from a discovery and a consumption point of view, and obviously put in place the appropriate policies and workflows to guide and protect that data for so that it's fit for purpose. If we were to overlay some technologies onto this data excellence journey or capabilities onto this data excellence journey, you now start to see some of the features and functions that exist in Talend and generally to drive things like data quality, data validation, data lineage for discovery and tracing and mapping of data, etc. So there's a direct relationship between capabilities and the journey that we enact. And then from a Talend product perspective, there's clearly an overlay between our modular architecture and our modular products that enable this incremental part of this journey. So if you're building confidence, then maybe inventory and quality are the first stepping stones. If you want to establish controls, then maybe add stewardship and potentially third-party products, etc. So the idea here is that we help you build this capability over time. So how do you actually go about establishing data excellence? The great news is that we've got you covered with our range of implementation acceleration services that are designed to guide successful delivery and shorten delivery times through a range of assets, such as reference architectures, proven established architecture and deployment patterns to take the guesswork out of design, toolkits, frames, and templates, reusable modular implementation components which provide development acceleration, best practices and guides to drive development guidance and assurance, and finally, value-added services. These are bite-sized activities delivered by Talend's professional services at key points in your project delivery, not just to the point of production, but beyond. And the idea here is that our implementation accelerator services are designed to deliver success and long-term value to your data excellence journey by partnering for the entire journey, not just the implementation. Okay, it is about working with you through this and working with you in partnership to ensure that we support you for the entire journey and deliver incremental value throughout that entire life cycle. These slides will be made available to you after the demonstration, but after the webinar, I should say. But if you do want to arrange a consultation with one of our experts, here's a QR code that you can actually scan with your phones right now and register for one of our consultants to actually engage with you in conversation. With that, I'd like to bring the session to a close and maybe look at the QA, but I don't think we have time. I'm hoping that you're now better placed to understand the value potential of your data and the steps by which you can achieve this potential. Thanks for joining me today. I know we're over time, but hopefully it's been a very useful session for you and hopefully some useful insights. And we welcome your feedback. We welcome your questions. So please do get in touch with us. So Jamie, back to you, but I do see some questions, but I'm not sure if we have the time to answer them.
I think I'm happy to go through them, and then if people need to drop, then that's okay, but happy to answer them as we're still on.
So a member was mentioning validity is bad if it's a high percentage. So I think this is possibly referring to the data quality scoring in the data inventory. Validity is bad if it's a high percentage. No, sorry, this is the trust score dimension then. Validity is good if it's a high percentage. So high percentage validity is compliance with the semantic determination or semantic types of data, and therefore compliance from a schema perspective. Another question. How big data set are working here? Will this work good with huge data set? Example close to millions. Dinesh, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So when we're using the trust score and the semantic determination and the analysis, we use push-down technology, specifically with solutions like Snowflake. So what we're doing here is actually not bringing the data into Talend, but actually using push-down compute to make all those assessments, make all of those scores and those data classifications in the native processing of the connected resource. Now, today we do that in Snowflake. There'll be other push-down resources that we support, for that compute. So yes, for Snowflake today, if you have very, very huge tables, very large data sets, then that push-down compute actually is the right thing to be doing to compute at scale in the native compute container of the connected data. Benny mentioned, how can we set this entire process of data validation and stewardship on the on-prem version of Talend? Okay, so that's a great question, Benny. There are some differences between the Talend on-premises version and the Talend Cloud version, which you've just seen. Aspects like Talend data inventory, trust score, do not exist in the on-premise version today. The reality is, though, that data quality profiling, data stewardship, and data preparation do exist on premises. So the majority of what you saw today could be implemented on premises. Is really the inventory and the trust score assessments that are not part of Talend on premises. And I think that was it from the list of questions that were asked online. Yep. So Jamie, back to you.
Great, thanks, Darren. We'll close it there. Just as I mentioned in some of the Q&A, we will be sending out the recording of the session as well as the slides. So thanks again for joining, and we'll close it there.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.